My guest is Brendan Hunt. He plays Coach Beard on one of my favorite TV shows, Ted Lasso. He's the co-creator of the show. You can find season 1 and hopefully season 2 on Apple Plus TV. Follow Brendan on Twitter at Brendan Hunting. Brendan, thanks so much for joining me on Sports Business Radio. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. I really want to hear the premise for this show and how you guys came up with it, because I watch a lot of TV. I watch a lot of movies. There's so many reboots. There's so much that's recycled right now. And this is truly clever and unique and original. Jason Sudeikis, who plays Ted Lasso, small-time college football coach from Kansas, wins a Division II national championship. Then he's hired to coach a professional soccer team in England, despite having no coaching experience. So I'm giving that out in case our audience hasn't watched Ted Lasso before. But how do you guys come up with this idea? Because it's really original.
Well, it was commercials first that we made for NBC Sports. That we were at the time they were trying to promote their new coverage of the English Premier League, and they saw a pathway into it as trying to not fight the fact that Americans typically don't know that much about soccer, but to sort of lean into it. So we did that the one year, and it went really, really well. And they had us come back the next year. And at that point, we started finding out that even though these videos were made for an American audience, they were being watched as much in the UK as they were at home. And that's when we started to think okay, this might have more legs to become something else.
So those videos were originally made in 2012, right?
2013 and 2014, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, you had a few years to kind of, come up with the idea. When did you and Jason, who I understand have known each other for a long time, when did you guys start talking about, hey, maybe we take this from commercials to TV show?
Pretty quickly. It was me and Jason and Joe Kelly as a sort of third member of our triad there, before Bill Lawrence came along later to make it a proper show. But after that second one, we pretty quickly got to work. We spent a week at Jason's place mapping out a 6-episode season and, some character arcs and stuff, a lot of which got kept eventually. But we were feeling pretty energized by it. But then Jason kept having babies, and that slows things down. So it took a while for, now all his kids can, speak and walk. And so I guess that meant he was clear to carry this thing further.
So when did you guys actually film this? What was it, 2018, 2019?
We filmed it last year, between August and November of last year.
And it looks like you're in London, right? That's where you went to film it. Yeah.
Yeah, every frame is shot in London. It was great.
How did you pick the locations? I mean, I'm really intrigued by everything from the locker room to the pubs to the apartments. It seems like you guys did a really nice job of scouting some great locations.
Yeah, we first of all, just a lot of really good designers and crew people, top to bottom. Bill Lawrence, who's the showrunner of the show, he at one point he took an advanced trip to London to figure out what would be the best area, and he came back just full of beautiful pictures of Richmond, and we were all yep, that's the spot. Okay, good. And then once we had that, then Jason and I went there and we walked around Richmond. We had a couple drinks with some of the producers, and at that point, our favorite bar, our production designer decided to physically reproduce our favorite bar in Richmond. So it's an exact copy that we have. So we have two versions of that bar to go to, one at work and one at play. But yeah, Richmond is, London's fantastic in general, but Richmond's really, really pretty. And it was really, really fun shooting there.
I love the depth of the characters on the show. When I saw, I've had Apple Plus TV for a while now, and when I saw some of the previews, I was like, okay, this is going to be funny and, comedic, and I like Jason, and but I've been really surprised by the depth of the characters and the storylines and kind of the emotional bond that I've created with you and with Ted Lasso and some of the other characters what are we on? I think we're on episode 8 right now, almost episode 9.
7 comes out tonight. Yeah.
Yeah.
At time of this interview. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you. Yeah. One thing we identified pretty early on was that the commercials, while super fun, were too broad, in terms of their comedic tone and in terms of the character and kind of a, almost slapstick nature. The second one was a little bit less broad and is a little more the tone that we're doing now. But we knew that if we were going to try to make an actual series out of this, these would have to be real people with real characters, especially because the premise itself is kind of silly. So, once we get past that, though, then we got to play it as real as possible, and as we say in the improv world, to the height of our intelligence. And so I think that's what you're feeling there, and hopefully that'll carry on.
Yeah. I mean, you feel like Ted Lasso and your character, Coach Beard, a little bit fish out of water. I mean, you're on the flight, you're coming over to London, but then when you get there, and I've been in a lot of locker rooms, I've worked for pro sports franchises here in America. Some of the psychology of coaching and how you relate to players, it starts to come out. And I really like that as each episode goes on. Because I think that's what makes players coachable, right? Like, you've got to have the psychology of relating to your players and having them respect and relate to you. Because, the first thing you think of is the players look at this coach and go, wait a minute, he's coached American football. He's never coached soccer before. How does this guy relate to us? But you quickly see Ted Lasso and Coach Beard start to relate to the players on another level.
Yeah, that's something that we're going for. And that, Jason has a lot of role models in this. He's got, he's a big fan of John Wooden. That's why we have John Wooden's Pyramid of Success hanging on our wall in our office in the show. He's met Bill Self a number of times. He's a huge Kansas fan, so loves Bill Self. But he also was an athlete, at least as far as high school, and maybe community college. You'll have to ask him about that. But he has coaches that he loved that meant a lot to him, and he's drawing specifically from his experience of that. Now, I was a phenomenally terrible athlete. I was incredibly bad at Little League. I was so bad at Little League that I thought that Charlie Brown strips about the misery of baseball were essentially documentaries. Like, it was just supposed to be like that, so that's how it was. I was terrible, but I kept going back for some horrible reason. So I do not have the positive coach examples to draw from, but Jason certainly does, as does Bill. And I think that's one of the things that helps make the character a little more realistic than you think it's going to be.
One of my favorite moments of the show so far, I'm a big Allen Iverson fan. So, and I think the practice press conference is maybe one of the most memorable sports press conferences of the last 30 years. And the scene in the show where Ted Lasso is talking to one of the players about practice, and, you can hear Allen Iverson in your ear. How did that come about? Because I thought it was brilliant. How did you guys come up with that?
I was actually thinking about this. I can't quite remember exactly. I think it was one of those days where, the writer's room kind of bounces things around, and then like someone says something and then it just kind of builds, and it's organic, and suddenly it's already happened. Either that or it was 100% Jason. One of those two things. There's really no middle ground. But we're coming at it from a place of great affection for Allen Iverson. I mean, I was never a Sixers fan. I'm from Chicago and love the Bulls. But everyone's got respect for Allen Iverson. And, that speech, it gets funny because it is funny, but it's, there's a lot of different things going on in Allen Iverson's personal life when that happens that I wasn't even aware of before we started looking at that speech a lot. But anyway, to key into the notion of Ted taking those words, but imbuing them with, opposite meaning, essentially, just sounded really, really fun and sounded like something that Ted would be about. And yeah, we haven't quite figured out the meta of it. Does Allen Iverson exist in the Ted Lasso universe? Has Ted never seen the speech before? He just happens to have done it. He's certainly not trying to quote it. I don't know. That's too much of a rabbit hole. But much love to AI.
Well, one of the things that I love about Twitter is that there's a lot of creative people out there, and sure enough, someone took the scene from Ted Lasso and they interlaced it with Allen Iverson's press conference. So you can see in real time, here's how Ted Lasso delivers it. Here's how Allen Iverson delivers it. And it was beautiful.
Yeah, we're getting some really cool fan content coming back at us right now. There's that. There's a guy who made a website called afcrichmond.com, which, I guess we're the morons who should have bought that address earlier. And he's making theathletic.com level breakdowns of our matches as if they were real, and our personnel changes. And it is fantastic. And so that, and the guy you're talking about, I think his name is David Stauffer. I can't quite remember.
Yeah.
But yeah. The fan content coming back at us is kind of overwhelming. It's really cool to see.
I love that. I got to check out. Is it afcrichmond.com? You said.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got to check that out. How many takes for the Allen Iverson? I'm talking about practice from Jason.
Oh, a lot. It was a lot of takes. Because he's got to run that whole scene basically. He has no dialogue to rely on coming back at him to help cue him. um and he had the full text of the speech, on a sheet of paper back in his office, and I'm like back there with him between takes, and I'm trying to like, okay, you said this wrong and this word should be over here, and he's like, yeah, got it. And in the end, the emphasis wasn't to do it exactly word for word, but we wanted to honor the tone of it as much as possible, so we spent a lot of time getting it right. And then in the editing, that had to be very meticulous as well. Like I remember one time at one edit was like, okay, the first time you say not a game, we need to see your face on not a game. We can't be on Jamie here. That's when the penny's going to drop for people. So it was a real, jigsaw puzzle to put together, but we are tickled by the result, and that people are so tickled by it as well.
I'm really interested in process. So it's my understanding that you and Jason met doing stand-up comedy. And when you do improv. So when you do improv, you are improving, but I'm wondering how you go from that to memorizing lines as an actor, because to me, that would be really hard. I mean, in my business, like I'm improving right now, but sometimes you're reading a teleprompter, and as an actor, you don't have a teleprompter there. You've got to memorize your lines. And like you said, you've got to figure out, how am I going to deliver these in the proper cadence and things like that. How hard has that been for you to go from improv to scripted lines?
Well, and I think this is true for Jason too. There's really been no time where we were just doing improv. That just happens to be where we met. And certainly we were both in school plays, so you're learning how to get your lines together from that point on. And then once you start doing it, eventually it just becomes a habit. And actors who've been acting long enough, you just learn them. You just learn them quick because you have to. There's a curtain going up, or there's a camera turning on, and you've got to be ready. So yeah, it's kind of just the necessity of the gig. So you just do it. And in terms of going from improv to acting, I don't know. I was always doing both. Like from a very young age, like when I was a kid, I literally wanted to be in both the Royal Shakespeare Company and Second City, which would be a tough gig just for the frequent flyer miles, frankly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always kind of been split between those two fields myself.
I've been to Second City, and what a brilliant place. So many amazing people like yourself have started there. When were you there?
Oh, I just took classes there, and like I wanted to be there as a kid. I never actually performed there. Instead, I went to Amsterdam and I did this thing called Boom Chicago. Not that I necessarily would have ever have done Second City anyway, but which is to say, not that they would have ever thought me good enough to be on their stage, which is a great place. But the years that I would have been there, instead I was in Amsterdam with Jason and with Joe Kelly, the other triad member of the show's creators, and ended up doing that instead. And that's where we all got into soccer.
Okay. So staying with process, you guys come up with the idea for this. Now you've got to take it and you've got to pitch it to someone. Was Apple Plus TV, were they the ones that you targeted all along? Or, do you have conversations with several different platforms before you wind up there?
Well, that's all a little above my pay grade, but I think what happened was, as is common, I think anytime you're ever pitching anything, you don't want to target one spot in particular. Right. You want to go to as many places as possible and hope for the best. And so I believe we went to all the streaming places from the beginning because we knew we wanted to be a streaming show and not a network show. And Apple just kind of won the bid, frankly. And we're pretty fortunate about that. I really love watching kind of what they're putting together product wise. There's just some great shows in this stable, and it's fun to be part of.
Well, they've done a nice job promoting you guys, I think, on their other programming. And then, there's a few F-bombs and things like that dropped in here. So this wouldn't have been a network TV show. It wouldn't have had the same feel if it was on network TV versus streaming.
Yeah. I mean, we're a little bit clean outside of the language, but there's no way you can show a locker room and sports life and not have cursing. It just would have been ridiculous to try. So they've always been very allowing of that. And so that's been great.
I love how Ted Lasso was bringing the owner of the team biscuits. And then we find out, I guess I hope, spoiler alert, we find out that Ted Lasso was making the biscuits at home. And I thought that was so charming. How did you come up with that idea? Because that's one of those things I'm talking about where there's that relatability with the character here.
Yeah, I can't remember how that idea came about specifically, but I think we knew early on that here's another spoiler for the people. The woman who hires Ted Lasso hires him because she wants the team to do badly. She's using him, and it just seemed pretty clear dramatically then, for her plan to be, for her to regret her plan more and more, he had to be as kind as possible, which he naturally is already. So that became like, oh, you bring an apple to the teacher every day. Oh, he goes biscuits with the boss. So yeah, it just came out of trying to create the dramatic tension of him being kind and her wanting to never actually have feelings for him because she doesn't want him humanized in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fun relationship to watch as the episodes have progressed, because she has her struggles too in her life. And I think the fact that Ted is so nice, she's like, maybe I can be a nicer person too. That's where I kind of see this going. So season 2, I've read in several of the trades that there is a season 2 of Ted Lasso. Has that been officially announced?
Yeah, it sure has. In those very trades. Yeah, we're writing it right now. In fact, we've been writing it for most of the summer, and theoretically, international issues being what they are, but if everything goes smoothly enough, we'll be out there again at the beginning of next year filming season 2.
And 10 episodes, is that kind of the goal?
That's the plan,
again?
yeah.
That's great. Yeah, isn't it weird, like thinking during a pandemic, how do you film? How do you return to quote unquote life as normal? Have you done anything during the pandemic, or have all of your projects been on hold?
I had a play that was supposed to open at the Kirk Douglas Theater, that a play I was in and that I wrote, and we were all very, very excited about it. And it was scheduled to open the Wednesday after the Thursday that was the shutdown, and that was a bummer. But then we started writing this pretty shortly after that, so I've been very fortunate to have a job during this whole time. But yeah, I mean, the live, I don't want to drag down too much, but the live event world is really, really suffering, in the same way the sports world has to a degree. But, at least sports have been able to go on for the most part just without an audience. But, theater and other, concerts and stuff, it's really, really tough going right now.
Yeah, it is very tough going. I hope that it returns to whatever the new normal looks like. I know a lot of people are out of work and this is their livelihood. So I hope that returns to normal. When you're writing an episode of Ted Lasso like you are right now, typically, how long does it take to write one episode?
Well, it's all a bit of a mishmash because, the idea is, there's 11 writers in the staff, and we all, work together. We would be around a conference table normally, but now it's just over Zoom. And, at first we talk about, the arc of the whole season basically, and everyone's pitching in and everyone has ideas, largely conducted by Bill. And then eventually it starts to get a little more specific, and we're dividing things into what the episodes are, and then eventually someone gets assigned an episode and they go away usually for a week, and then they come back with a draft, and we give notes on that, and we go from there. So the nuts and bolts takes a week, but the if I may mix my metaphors, the planting of the seeds happens much earlier.
And you have more time right now because production isn't going on, but typically, are you writing the entire season or are you writing episode by episode?
Both, I guess, but in order.
Yeah.
But yeah, we get the writers are hired for 18 weeks, which is pretty standard. And hopefully be able to get that done in that time. But sometimes these things get extended, who knows. But yeah, luckily no one has a lot else to do, so it looks like we're gonna make it.
Before I let you go, your character, Coach Beard, I love, you're like the the straight guy. You know, you're kind of stoic at times. You know, you chime in now and again. Is that your natural personality? Because just by talking to you now, it doesn't seem like that's your natural personality. You seem more outgoing than Coach Beard.
It is not my natural personality. I am a loquacious blabbermouth, as a matter of fact. But you know, it's not my job on this. My job here is to, you know, serve the scene, and Beard's job is to serve Ted, you know, by doing such things like learning the rules of soccer and whatever else Ted can't quite find time for. So it's super fun actually to play straight man and to just to be more economical and surgical with my you know, moments of impact, so to speak. You know, much as Jordan changed his game late in his career. Oh no, I won't make that comparison. But yeah, mixing it up, it's kind of fun.
So have you been a Bulls fan all your life?
The very first basketball game I ever watched was the Michael Jordan 63-point game against the Celtics. And I knew the Bulls had existed before then, but I just never was a basketball guy. I knew that there was someone named Reggie Theus and someone named Artis Gilmore, and Orlando Woolridge. But then that game, I mean, I just couldn't believe it. Because also somehow, even though I'd never watched a basketball game, I knew to hate the Celtics. It was just something that I, you know, found natural. But from then on, just hardcore Bulls fan to this day. And the day Derrick Rose got injured is still a real sad day in my life.
Yeah, no, that totally changed the arc of that franchise for till now, really. Yeah. Did you watch Last Dance? The documentary?
Oh yeah, every second of it.
Wasn't it amazing? What did you like the most about it?
I don't know. It's a great question because there wasn't that much of it that was new. You know, like we kind of seen all of this before, either from being a Bulls fan or like watching the Dream Team documentary, for example. But just, you know, watching it play out, you know, finding out just how much of a distraction Dennis Rodman actually was, you know, and like hearing some of the warts and all come out, because like a lot of this stuff was also in Sam Smith's book, The Jordan Rules, which I read while I was in high school. But, you know, getting it out there about all the guys that, you know, Jordan punched in practice and that sort of thing. It was just great to see it again and to relive it, because that was really an incredible time that I associate, as I'm sure all Bulls fans do. Like you associate that period with a specific period of your life and the friends you hung out with then, you know, who you'd gather around the TV to watch with, because you couldn't, you know, you're not DVRing those games. You're watching them as they happen. You're experiencing those emotions without interruption. And yeah, it was just good to relive that again. Last Dance was chef's a kiss. Mwah.
So I used to work in the NBA and have friends that are still there. So I'll tell you this. Maybe you don't know this. Only 5% of all of the footage that they shot was used in that documentary. So 95% of the footage they shot wasn't even used. So imagine, like, you could do another couple of Last Dances. When I heard that, I was like, my God, that's a lot of footage they still have.
I will say there was a real shortage of Luke Longley in that thing. And I will happily watch 10 episodes of the Luke Longley story. And I think I speak for America when I say that. So let's make that happen.
That's right. Soccer team. Do you have a favorite soccer club? Who are they?
Yes, Arsenal. Of London.
Okay. Yes. So has that helped you by being a fan for being part of the AFC Richmond club? That's where you've brushed up on all of your soccer knowledge?
Yeah. So we all, you know, lived in Amsterdam for different periods. Me and Joe and Jason doing comedy out there with a theater called Boom Chicago. And yeah, again, there was no streaming, there was no DVRing. So I couldn't watch the Bulls or the Bears. And so I had a sports shaped hole in my life, and I slowly gravitated towards soccer. You know, in Holland, in particular, is a great team in, you know, European championships and World Cups. And I moved there in 1999, and in Euro 2000, Holland was the host. So it was a particularly big tournament there. And I lived with 8 Dutch guys. I just randomly, they had like a 3-story apartment above McDonald's around the corner from where I lived. And when I finally realized how big soccer was there was when my roommates built bleachers in our living room so that when we had parties to watch these games, the sight lines would be good for everybody. And there was a sign-up sheet, because you couldn't just bring anybody. You had to sign up to bring friends, because they had calculated like the weight distribution and how much would be too much for it all to collapse. So we had a projector and actual bleachers for the entire month of this tournament. And that among other things got me hooked forever. Like, I'd been told all my life that soccer was lame or boring or what have you. And like, I'd been lied to. I'd been lied to. It's one thing if you don't like sports, but if you don't like sports and you don't like soccer, then you confuse me. I don't understand, because soccer's fantastic.
What an amazing time in your life. And it sounds like the bleachers across from Wrigley Field, doesn't it? It kind of sounds like same kind of setup.
Yeah, except I think at Wrigley Field, they were getting less drunk than we were getting watching Holland.
Well, that's great. Well, I appreciate your time. Brendan Hunt, you can follow him on Twitter at Brendan Hunting. You can watch him on Ted Lasso on Apple Plus TV, co-creator of the show. Coach Beard, you guys do a phenomenal job. I tip my cap to you, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You're listening to Sports Business Radio. We'll be right back.